The trade war between Canada and the US is heating up, with President Donald Trump warning Canadian leaders to fall in line or face consequences that he said would be far more severe than the tariffs already imposed. The remarks by President Trump came as he threatened to double tariffs on Canadian vehicles beginning next year. In a post on his Truth Social network, President Trump said that on 1st of January 2027, tariffs on all cars, trucks, both large and small, automotive parts as well as steel will be increased to 50%. The current US tariff impacting Canadian autos stands at 25% for non-US content, while imported steel to the US generally faces a 50% duty. The North American allies failed to reach a deal to avert new 50% US tariffs on select Canadian goods. The duties took effect on Saturday, and Ottawa even announced retaliatory tariffs effective 8th of September. These will target US steel and dairy industries while also covering sectors like agriculture, equipment, paper and electronics. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has criticized Trump's threat on autos, using an expletive to express his frustration. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said that it wasn't a surprise that the US would take some form of reprisal against Canada.
It's not a surprise for us that the US would take some form of reprisal to our response to their unjustified tariff, which was on top of other unjustified tariffs. That's not a surprise. But what message does that send to the workers in Michigan and Ohio and Kentucky and Alabama who rely on Canadian demand?
Carney, however, said a mutually beneficial deal with the US would be possible, and that is if the United States returned to the negotiating table with the right attitude.
But an attitude at the negotiation table that Canada is a subsidiary of the United States, that Canadian industry is going to be disadvantaged relative to American industry, that we're going to set up terms so that over time Canadian industry is going to face constant headwinds. That's not something we're going to accept.
Following the collapse of negotiations last week, Carney accused the US of seeking to undermine key Canadian industries, including the automotive, steel and aluminium sectors. And this through what he described as unfair negotiating terms, and pointed to what he called a last-minute demand from the US negotiators for restrictions on Canada's trade agreements with other countries. However, at a separate event on Monday, Vice President J.D. Vance countered that it was Canada that had made unreasonable demands at the 11th hour.
They treat Chinese goods more fairly than they do the goods that come from the people of Maine. It's insanity. And what we've said to Canada is stop it. Apply a basic principle of fairness to the trade that you're doing between North Dakota and Canada, between Maine and Canada. And what happened at the very end is they came in with a bunch of unreasonable last-minute demands. I frankly thought we had a deal.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent took an aim at Carney, saying he rose to power on an anti-American, anti-Trump platform and is back to his old playbook.
He seems to have gone back to his old playbook, and I think one has to ask oneself, is he trying to benefit himself, the Liberal Party, or the Canadian people? Because they were offered a very good job.